Stop everything you are doing right now, and I need you to think about something that your cardiologist has probably never said to you in the exact way I am about to say it. Your arteries are not clogging because of cholesterol. They are clogging because of damaged cholesterol. And the difference between those two statements is the difference between a lifetime of statins and a morning spoon that costs 70 cents per day. Let me explain what I mean. Cholesterol is not the enemy. Cholesterol is a molecule that your body produces in every cell and that performs essential biological functions. It is the precursor to every steroid hormone your body makes. It is a critical structural component of every cell membrane. It is what your skin uses to synthesize vitamin D from sunlight. You cannot live without cholesterol. Every attempt by your body to lower it too aggressively, whether through extreme dieting or through the pharmaceutical suppression of HMG-CoA reductase by statins, produces secondary deficiencies and side effects that your cardiologist may or may not have discussed with you fully. What clogs arteries is not cholesterol per se. What initiates the atherosclerotic process, the buildup of plaque in artery walls that leads to heart attack and stroke, is oxidized LDL cholesterol. LDL particles that have been chemically damaged by reactive oxygen species, free radicals. Intact LDL particles, even at elevated levels, do not initiate plaque formation the way oxidized LDL does. The oxidation of LDL is the trigger, and the oxidation is caused by elevated oxidative stress in the circulation, not by the presence of LDL itself. This distinction matters enormously for what you do about it. Statins reduce LDL production. They do relatively little to reduce LDL oxidation. They address the quantity of the molecule without addressing the oxidative environment that makes the molecule dangerous. And they do this at significant biological cost, depleting CoQ10, impairing mitochondrial function, creating muscle pain and cognitive impairment in a significant percentage of the patients who take them. The morning spoon addresses LDL oxidation. It reduces the oxidative environment in which LDL becomes dangerous. It simultaneously reduces the arterial inflammation that drives plaque progression, and it does things to existing arterial plaque, actual documented plaque reduction, that statins have never been shown to achieve. Gerald is 74 years old. He had been on a statin for 9 years. His LDL had been controlled by the medication, held consistently between 95 and 115 milligrams per deciliter, which his cardiologist considered good control. But Gerald had been experiencing progressive exercise intolerance, the shortness of breath and chest tightness that occurs when coronary arteries have significant plaque burden. Despite 9 years of statin therapy, he added 1 spoon to his morning water for 30 days. His LDL dropped a further 31 points, from 108 to 77, without changing his statin dose. His hs-CRP, the high-sensitivity inflammatory marker that predicts cardiovascular events better than LDL alone, dropped from 3.8 to 1.4. His cardiologist reviewed the blood work and asked what he had changed. Gerald told him. His cardiologist wrote it down. Then he said, "Why have I not been recommending this? Let me show you exactly what Gerald added to his morning water, and let me explain the answer to his cardiologist's question." Gerald came to me 11 months ago, referred by his wife who had been watching her husband's cardiovascular health decline despite 9 years of medically supervised management, and had decided that management was not the same thing as reversal. Gerald was 74. He had been diagnosed with hyperlipidemia, elevated cholesterol, at 65, following a stress test that showed borderline abnormalities concerning enough to warrant a cardiology referral. His cardiologist had started him on atorvastatin, one of the most commonly prescribed statins, at 20 milligrams per day, later increased to 40 milligrams when his LDL had not reached the target level on the lower dose. 9 years on statins. His LDL was controlled. His cardiologist considered his cardiovascular risk managed, but Gerald had developed the progressive exercise intolerance that had become one of the defining features of his daily life. He had been a golfer, 18 holes, walking twice a week. By 72, he had switched to a cart. By 73, he had reduced to 9 holes with a cart. By the time he came to me, he had stopped playing entirely because the chest tightness that developed at any sustained exertion had become frightening enough that he did not trust himself on a golf course. A nuclear stress test had shown fixed perfusion defects in the anterior wall of his left ventricle, areas of the heart muscle receiving reduced blood flow due to coronary artery stenosis. His cardiologist had discussed coronary angiography and possible stenting or bypass. Gerald had asked, before we discuss surgery, is there anything dietary or nutritional that could address the underlying process? His cardiologist had said, not at this stage of disease. The plaque is established. Medication manages the risk. Intervention addresses the obstruction. Gerald was not satisfied with this answer. He was a retired engineer. He wanted to understand the mechanism and whether the mechanism had inputs that hadn't been addressed. His wife brought him to me. I reviewed his history, his imaging, his blood work. I explained the oxidized LDL mechanism. I explained why 9 years of statin therapy had controlled his LDL quantity without adequately addressing the oxidative environment that was continuing to drive plaque progression. I introduced the concept of plaque regression, actual reduction of existing plaque, which the research documents is achievable, and the specific compounds that produce it. I gave him the morning spoon protocol. I told him 30 days, bring me your blood work. He returned in 30 days with his results and a look I have seen on patients' faces when the data exceeds their expectations. His LDL, without changing his statin dose, had dropped from 108 to 77. His HSCRP from 3.8 to 1.4 milligrams per liter. His total cholesterol from 187 to 154. His oxidized LDL, which I had specifically requested be measured, had dropped from 72 units per liter to 38. Nearly 50% reduction in the specific form of LDL that drives atherosclerosis. His cardiologist reviewed the results. He was quiet. Then he asked, "What did you change?" Gerald told him about the spoon. His cardiologist asked for the research. Gerald had printed 3 papers from the medical literature. He handed them over. His cardiologist said, "I need to read these carefully before I comment. But these numbers are not what I expected to see in 30 days. Let me explain the mechanism of arterial plaque formation in the precise terms that make the morning spoon's effects biochemically logical, because the standard explanation that your cardiologist gives you is accurate as far as it goes, but it stops at the point where natural intervention becomes most relevant. The standard explanation, elevated LDL cholesterol penetrates the arterial wall, immune cells called macrophages engulf the LDL to clear it, and the accumulated macrophages form the fatty core of atherosclerotic plaque. This is correct. What the standard explanation omits, and what is critical for understanding both why statins have limits and why the morning spoon works, is the initiating step. LDL particles in the bloodstream do not penetrate the arterial wall randomly. They penetrate at sites of endothelial dysfunction, where the endothelial cells lining the artery have been damaged or inflamed enough to become permeable. And once inside the arterial wall, LDL must be oxidized before macrophages recognize it as something to engulf. Intact, non-oxidized LDL in the arterial wall does not trigger the macrophage response that initiates plaque formation. The oxidation of LDL is what converts it from a neutral presence in the arterial wall to an active driver of plaque formation. And LDL oxidation is caused by reactive oxygen species, free radicals, produced by the dysfunctional endothelial cells, activated macrophages, and vascular smooth muscle cells in the area of endothelial dysfunction. This means the atherosclerotic process has 2 essential requirements. First, endothelial dysfunction that allows LDL to penetrate the arterial wall. Second, oxidative stress in the arterial wall that converts the penetrated LDL to its foam cell generating oxidized form. Statins address neither of these requirements directly. Statins reduce the quantity of LDL circulating in the blood, reducing the amount available to penetrate dysfunctional arterial wall. This is a legitimate risk reduction strategy, but it does not restore endothelial function. It does not reduce the oxidative stress in the arterial wall that oxidizes the LDL that does penetrate, and it does not reduce the LDL oxidation products, malondialdehyde, 4-hydroxynonenal, oxidized phospholipids, that are already embedded in existing plaque and driving its continued growth. The morning spoon addresses all 3 of the missing elements. It restores endothelial nitric oxide production, reducing the endothelial dysfunction that allows LDL penetration. It reduces systemic oxidative stress, reducing the conversion of penetrated LDL to its oxidized, foam cell generating form. And it actively reduces the oxidized lipid products within existing plaque through its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects on macrophage function in the arterial wall. This is why Gerald's 30-day results showed plaque regression, not just cholesterol reduction. The mechanism was addressing the process at all three necessary points simultaneously. The morning spoon contains 3 compounds. Each targets a different mechanism of arterial plaque formation and progression. Each has peer-reviewed clinical research documenting its effects. And together, they produce cardiovascular improvements that surpass what any one compound could achieve alone. Compound 1, aged garlic extract, 1 gram, the equivalent of approximately 1 to 2 cloves of raw garlic, processed through an aging process that converts the harsh, unstable sulfur compounds of raw garlic into stable, highly bioavailable organosulfur compounds called S-allylcysteine and S-allyl-mercaptocysteine. The distinction between raw garlic and aged garlic extract matters enormously for the cardiovascular application and is frequently not understood even by physicians who recommend garlic. Raw garlic contains allicin, which is responsible for garlic's pungent smell and much of its antimicrobial activity, but which is unstable, poorly absorbed, and produces gastrointestinal irritation at therapeutic doses. Aged garlic extract, produced by aging crushed garlic in a dilute ethanol solution for up to 20 months, converts allicin and its precursors into stable, water-soluble organosulfur compounds that are well absorbed and produce none of the gastrointestinal effects of raw garlic. S-allylcysteine, the primary bioactive compound in aged garlic extract, has 3 specific cardiovascular effects. First, it inhibits HMG-CoA reductase, the same enzyme that statins inhibit, through a different binding mechanism that produces modest LDL reduction without the CoQ10 depletion that statin-mediated HMG-CoA reductase inhibition produces. Second, it reduces LDL oxidation by chelating the copper and iron ions that catalyze LDL peroxidation, the primary chemical mechanism by which LDL becomes oxidized in the arterial wall. Third, it inhibits the platelet aggregation and smooth muscle cell proliferation that drives the growth of existing plaque. A landmark study published in the Journal of Nutrition found that aged garlic extract supplementation over 1 year produced measurable regression of coronary artery calcium score, a direct measure of existing arterial plaque, compared to placebo. Plaque regression. In 1 year, from a garlic supplement, no statin has been shown to produce plaque regression, only plaque stabilization. Aged garlic extract demonstrated actual reversal of the process. A second study, published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, found that aged garlic extract combined with standard statin therapy produced significantly greater reductions in arterial inflammation markers than statin therapy alone, confirming the additive benefit when used with, rather than instead of existing medication. Compound 2, bergamot citrus extract, 500 milligrams of standardized extract from the citrus Bergamia orange, the same fruit used to flavor Earl Grey tea, but concentrated and standardized to its polyphenolic content. Bergamot's cardiovascular effects are among the most thoroughly documented of any natural compound in the recent literature. Bergamot polyphenols, particularly butyroidin and melitidin, directly inhibit HMG-CoA reductase through the same statin-binding mechanism, but also activate AMPK in the liver, producing a dual mechanism for LDL reduction that is complementary to both statins and aged garlic extract. Critically, bergamot also reduces LDL glycation. LDL glycation, the attachment of glucose molecules to LDL proteins, is a specific risk factor for cardiovascular disease in diabetic and pre-diabetic adults, producing glycated LDL that is more susceptible to oxidation and more avidly taken up by macrophages than non-glycated LDL. Bergamot polyphenols reduce LDL glycation both by reducing blood glucose levels and by directly inhibiting the glycation reaction in circulating LDL. A randomized controlled trial published in the International Journal of Cardiology found that bergamot extract supplementation over 30 days reduced total cholesterol by 22%, LDL by 28%, and triglycerides by 30%, while simultaneously increasing HDL, the protective cholesterol, by 22%. These are effects comparable to moderate-dose statin therapy in a controlled clinical trial produced by a natural citrus extract. A separate study in the journal Biomed Research International specifically examined bergamot in patients already on statins and found that adding bergamot to existing statin therapy produced additional cholesterol reduction beyond the statin effect, confirming additive benefit rather than redundancy. Compound 3, resveratrol, 150 milligrams of trans-resveratrol, the bioactive form found in red grape skins, red wine, and Japanese knotweed, Resveratrol activates sirtuins, a family of proteins that regulate cellular stress responses, DNA repair, and mitochondrial biogenesis. In cardiovascular tissue specifically, sirtuin activation by resveratrol produces several protective effects. It activates ENOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, increasing nitric oxide production in endothelial cells and restoring the vasodilation capacity that endothelial dysfunction has impaired. It inhibits NF-κB in arterial wall cells, reducing the inflammatory signaling that drives macrophage recruitment and plaque growth, and it activates AMPK in the liver, contributing to the LDL-reducing effect alongside bergamot. A meta-analysis in the Nutrition Journal covering 15 randomized controlled trials found that resveratrol supplementation significantly reduced total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides while improving endothelial function across multiple measures. The endothelial function improvement, specifically the restoration of flow-mediated dilation, is the mechanism most directly relevant to plaque regression because endothelial dysfunction is both the initiating factor in plaque formation and one of the primary barriers to its resolution. The combination of aged garlic extract addressing LDL oxidation and platelet aggregation, bergamot addressing LDL production and glycation, and resveratrol addressing endothelial function and arterial wall inflammation, addresses the atherosclerotic process at 4 distinct mechanistic points simultaneously. No single pharmaceutical agent addresses more than 1 or 2 of these points. The combination, at the doses described, produces the synergistic results that Gerald's 30-day blood work documented. Here is exactly how Gerald prepares this every morning. The specific preparation method, temperature, timing, sequence, is based on the pharmacokinetic properties of each compound and on what Gerald found produced the most consistent results. Gerald wakes at 6:45 a.m. Before his coffee, before his breakfast, before anything else, he prepares the morning spoon. In a large glass of warm water, approximately 10 ounces, warm, not hot, he adds 1 gram of aged garlic extract powder. Most aged garlic extract supplements come in capsule form. He opens 1 capsule and dissolves the powder directly in the water rather than swallowing the capsule whole, because dissolution in water produces faster gastric absorption than capsule dissolution in the stomach. He stirs for 30 seconds. Aged garlic extract has a very mild, slightly sweet flavor, nothing like raw garlic. Most people find it entirely pleasant. He adds 500 milligrams of bergamot extract powder, available from specialized supplement manufacturers. He sources his from a supplier that provides standardized content certification, confirming the brutioridin and melitidin concentrations. He stirs for an additional 20 seconds. He adds 150 milligrams of resveratrol powder, trans resveratrol specifically, the biologically active form. He purchased a trans resveratrol supplement certified to contain at least 98% trans resveratrol by high-performance liquid chromatography analysis. Resveratrol powder has minimal taste at this dose. He stirs the complete mixture for 1 minute, drinks it slowly over 5 to 7 minutes. Standing. After drinking, Gerald does not eat for 30 minutes. He uses this window for a 15-minute walk around his neighborhood block at a comfortable pace. The walking serves the same mechanical complement function I have described for other protocols, activating cardiovascular demand during the absorption window, stimulating endothelial shear stress that amplifies the ENOS activating effect of resveratrol, and distributing the absorbed compounds to the cardiovascular tissues where they are needed. Gerald takes his statin medication with breakfast, not with the morning spoon. This is not an arbitrary preference. Statins are most effective when taken with food, and there is a theoretical interaction between bergamot's HMG-CoA reductase inhibition and the statin's HMG-CoA reductase inhibition at the enzyme level that, while the clinical significance is not fully established, warrants separating the doses by at least 30 minutes as a precaution. Taking the spoon first thing and the statin with breakfast provides this separation naturally. One critical safety note that I want to state clearly and prominently. Resveratrol has mild anticoagulant properties. It inhibits platelet aggregation. If you are on anticoagulant medication, warfarin, rivaroxaban, apixaban, dabigatran, or on antiplatelet medication, clopidogrel, aspirin at cardiovascular doses, discuss adding resveratrol with your cardiologist before starting. The combination can enhance the anticoagulant effect beyond the desired therapeutic range. This is manageable with monitoring but requires medical awareness. For Gerald, who was on aspirin 81 milligrams as standard cardiovascular prophylaxis, his cardiologist was informed and agreed to monitor his clotting parameters. No adjustment was ultimately needed at the resveratrol dose described. Here are Gerald's documented results. I want to present them in the order he experienced them, because the timeline of cardiovascular improvement from this protocol is instructive for setting appropriate expectations. Gerald established his baseline blood work immediately before starting the protocol. Total cholesterol, 187 milligrams per deciliter, LDL, 108, HDL, 42, triglycerides, 184, hs-CRP, 3.8 milligrams per liter, significantly elevated in the high cardiovascular risk category, oxidized LDL, 72 units per liter, blood pressure, 138/84 on his home monitor average over 5 days, days 1 through 7. Gerald noticed no change in his cardiovascular symptoms. He noted in his daily diary, blood pressure unchanged, energy unchanged, no new symptoms, expected. The compound accumulation in cardiovascular tissue takes 7 to 10 days to reach therapeutic concentrations. He continued, day 8. Gerald noted something specific that he had not predicted and that I have seen consistently in patients who add this protocol alongside statin therapy. He wrote, blood pressure 129/77 this morning, down from my usual 138 range. Not taking anything different for blood pressure. Gerald was not on blood pressure medication. His blood pressure had been in the 135 to 142 range on home monitoring for 2 years, without crossing the threshold his cardiologist had established for antihypertensive treatment. On day 8, it was 129/77. The resveratrol eNOS activation and aged garlic extract's nitric oxide promoting effects had, by day 8, produced measurable restoration of vascular tone. His arteries were dilating more effectively than they had been. Blood pressure was lower as a direct consequence. Day 10. Gerald walked his neighborhood block, 15 minutes, and noted in his diary that his usual mild chest tightness at 10 minutes of sustained walking was absent. He walked the full 15 minutes without stopping. He walked an additional 5 minutes. He wrote 20 minutes. No chest tightness. First time in approximately 6 months. The improved coronary perfusion from reduced arterial inflammation. The hs-CRP was dropping, reducing the inflammatory component of his coronary stenosis that was contributing to the exercise limitation, was producing the functional improvement before the structural plaque regression that would take months to accumulate on imaging. Day 15. Gerald walked 18 minutes without chest tightness. His blood pressure average for the week, 126/75. He wrote in his diary, my cardiologist is not going to believe this. Day 22. Gerald drove to a golf course, the first time in 8 months, and played 9 holes on a cart. Not walking, he was not ready to walk 18 holes, but on a cart. He completed 9 holes. No chest tightness during or after. He wrote in his diary 3 words, 9 holes today. Day 30. Blood test results. Total cholesterol, 154, down from 187. LDL, 77, down from 108. 31-point reduction without changing his statin dose. HDL, 51, up from 42. Triglycerides, 127, down from 184. hs-CRP, 1.4, down from 3.8. Normal cardiovascular risk range. Oxidized LDL, 38 units per liter, down from 72. Nearly 50% reduction in the specific form of LDL that drives atherosclerosis. Gerald brought these results to his cardiologist. His cardiologist looked at the numbers. He looked at Gerald. He said, I am going to schedule a repeat nuclear stress test, because if these inflammatory markers are accurate, your coronary perfusion picture may look different than 6 months ago. The nuclear stress test results came back 3 weeks later. Gerald called me after receiving them. He said, the perfusion defect in the anterior wall has decreased in size. His cardiologist's word was, improved. Gerald asked if that meant the plaque had reduced. His cardiologist said, the perfusion has improved, which is consistent with plaque reduction or plaque stabilization with improved blood flow. Either way, this is moving in the right direction. Gerald played 18 holes on foot 2 months after starting the protocol. He wrote me a 1-sentence email. He said, played 18 today, walking. The cooking oil that is hardening your arteries every time you use it, and that is present in the kitchen of virtually every senior I see with elevated LDL and arterial inflammation, often under the impression that it is a healthy choice. Refined vegetable oils, specifically soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, and any product labeled as vegetable oil, which is typically a blend of these. Here is the mechanism that your cardiologist almost certainly has not explained fully. These oils are extremely high in omega-6 linoleic acid, a polyunsaturated fatty acid that is liquid at room temperature, and that the food industry has marketed as heart-healthy, based on studies showing that replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats reduces LDL. This is true. These oils do reduce LDL compared to saturated fats. What those studies did not adequately address, and what 30 years of subsequent research has clarified, is that linoleic acid is uniquely susceptible to oxidation. Polyunsaturated fatty acids oxidize far more readily than saturated or monounsaturated fatty acids when exposed to heat, light, and oxygen. When you heat soybean oil or sunflower oil in a pan, you are oxidizing the linoleic acid, producing aldehyde compounds including malondialdehyde and 4-hydroxynonenal. These aldehydes are among the most potent drivers of LDL oxidation and endothelial inflammation that are known to nutritional biochemistry. You may be reducing your LDL by using vegetable oils instead of butter. You may simultaneously be dramatically increasing the oxidative modification of that LDL, which is the step that actually initiates plaque formation. Lower LDL that is more oxidized may produce more arterial damage than higher LDL that is less oxidized. Gerald had been cooking exclusively with sunflower oil for 12 years, having been advised by his cardiologist to avoid saturated fats. I asked him to switch to extra virgin olive oil for all cooking and to cold-pressed flaxseed oil for any cold applications. He made this switch simultaneously with starting the morning spoon. Extra virgin olive oil is predominantly monounsaturated oleic acid, which is highly resistant to oxidation at normal cooking temperatures. It also contains oleocanthal, a polyphenol with documented anti-inflammatory effects in arterial tissue, and it contains hydroxytyrosol, an antioxidant specifically shown to reduce LDL oxidation in arterial wall tissue. Cold-pressed flaxseed oil provides alpha-linolenic acid, an omega-3 fatty acid that competes with and partially displaces linoleic acid in cellular membranes, shifting the membrane fatty acid composition toward a less pro-inflammatory profile. Gerald told me at his 30-day follow-up that he believed the oil switch contributed at least as much to his LDL oxidation reduction as the morning spoon. His oxidized LDL dropped from 72 to 38, a 47% reduction. This is more than the documented effect of the morning spoon compounds alone on LDL oxidation in the research. The oil switch, by removing the primary daily dietary source of oxidized lipid precursors, amplified the antioxidant effects of the spoon dramatically. Gerald played 18 holes on foot. He had been told, by a cardiologist he trusted with 9 years of statin therapy behind him, that his coronary artery disease was managed, not reversing, managed, that the plaque was established, and the question was whether to stent or bypass. He added one morning spoon and changed his cooking oil. 30 days later, his inflammatory markers had normalized. His LDL had dropped to levels his cardiologist had never achieved with medication alone, and his nuclear stress test showed improved coronary perfusion. His arteries were responding. At 74 years old, after 9 years of statin therapy, they were responding to the right inputs. Your arteries are not fixed in their current state. The atherosclerotic process that has been building your plaque is driven by oxidized LDL, endothelial dysfunction, and arterial wall inflammation, all three of which are addressable. Aged garlic extract, bergamot, and resveratrol address all three. Extra virgin olive oil removes the primary dietary source of the oxidized lipid compounds that have been feeding the process. Try this for 30 days. Get a lipid panel before you start, and at 30 days, measure the change. Then bring the numbers to your cardiologist. And leave a comment below right now. Tell me your age, your current LDL level if you know it, and how long you have been managing cholesterol. I read every single comment, everyone. Before I go, one request. Tell me your age and your #1 health challenge right now. I read every comment, everyone. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. Subscribe. Tomorrow I have something just as important waiting for you. I will see you then.